Idaho Matters is brought to you in part by St. Luke's Pharmacy, now offering free home delivery. For daily medications or one-time prescriptions, home delivery is easy to set up. It's convenient and safe. St. Luke's Pharmacy, now delivering to your doorstep. Information on how to get started at stlukesonline.org.
Love Boise State Public Radio podcasts? They are free to enjoy, but not free to produce. If you can give, your support helps keep shows like Idaho Matters and Scandalize available to everyone. Donate now at boisestatepublicradio.org.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Gemma Gaudet. You're listening to Idaho Matters. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention could soon see new leadership. President Trump has nominated Dr. Erica Schwartz, a longtime public health official and former Deputy Surgeon General, to lead the agency. Supporters are pointing to her decades of experience in preventative medicine and federal health service, while critics are raising concerns about the broader direction of public health leadership. Now, if confirmed by the Senate, Dr. Schwartz would take over at a moment when trust in public health institutions remains quite fragile. It is Wednesday, which means Dr. David Pate is joining us now. He is the former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and co-author of the book Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak, to talk more about all of this. Hi, Dr. Pate.
Hi, Gemma.
And folks, remember, if you have a public health question, send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu. So, Dr. Pate, from your perspective, how significant is it that Dr. Schwartz has both clinical and public health training, and how could that possibly shape her leadership at the CDC if confirmed?
Well, I think that the answer to the first part of your question is that is ideal for who's going to lead the Centers for Disease Control. A person who is a physician, who has public health expertise and medical expertise, a history of being involved clinically. So I think that's very, very important and what we should always strive for. The answer to your second part of your question is really difficult to say at this moment, because if she were to be given autonomy, I would feel quite optimistic. However, we all know that she will be under the thumb of RFK Jr., and so that is what is still giving most of us who really care about public health and disease management and preparedness a lot of indigestion. We just don't know how heavy his thumb is going to be on her.
So, Dr. Pate, given her background then, she has a military background, we should let folks know, and as we mentioned, federal public health service as well. What strengths, or I guess maybe even potential blind spots, do you think that she could bring to this role? Really at a time when public trust in health agencies, I think Dr. Pate is still recovering from, 6 years ago when the pandemic started and going through all of that.
There's no doubt, no doubt. And so I think for reasons to feel optimistic is one, just as you said, she's got a long history of service, both in the military and in our government. And I think that will mean she's not coming into this naive. She's going to understand chain of command. She's going to understand bureaucracy. She's going to understand all of that. But I think her experience, she's been very much focused on preventative medicine in the past. And of course, that is a critical thing going forward, I think, for our country, if we're going to get in control of the public's health and the health costs that's running away. But also, she has experience with pandemic planning and in planning for chemical and bio terrorism weapons, radiologic weapons, those kind of things, which not too many people going into that position would likely have. So I think she's the full package. And again, if if we can be assured that RFK Jr. is not going to exert pressure that would cause her to compromise on her values or the science, then I will feel very good. The question is, can she last in this environment? The last one, who was of similar qualifications, didn't make it a month.
So that is that, would you say, the bigger concern then? Because she is highly qualified, as you've just spoken about, but it is, is she willing in a way to play that political game that historically, public health has not had to be a part of?
Well, that's right. I do think there is a few things that are in her favor more than was in place at the time the last CDC director lost her job, and that is that if you listen to the congressional hearings, we've got more Republicans now speaking out against RFK Jr. When you look at which no doubt Republicans are taking a look at how is the polling going, how are things shaping up for the midterms. I think there's a greater appreciation that the key interests of the electorate as a whole are not on destroying public health and science and vaccines. Certainly there is a component of people that are interested in that, but that is not the majority. They're focused more on economic issues, immigration, security, those kinds of things. And so I think that there's even some reporting that tends to suggest that President Trump is realizing he's probably got the bang that he's going to get for his buck in RFK Jr., and that having him go further crazy is probably not going to help him. So it's possible he'll have RFK Jr. back off. Certainly the courts are putting the brakes on RFK Jr. to a great extent. I think if there's reason to be hopeful, it's more now than it was previously, and I will keep my fingers crossed.
So let's step back from the individual nominee for a minute. In your opinion, what do you think are the most urgent priorities for the CDC right now?
Well, I think number one, restoring that trust, but I don't think that trust can be restored until the CDC stops being a political football. That's where we lose trust, is when politics are in control. So I think that for us to regain that trust, we really need to let the CDC director run with things, not be micromanaged. We certainly need to try to keep politics out. There should be more support at the highest levels for getting true medical information out to people, true scientific analysis of situations, and promote that, and have people take a step back from trying to have so much political overlay. Now, could that happen? I guess perhaps if Republicans do get a good thumping for this midterm, I would certainly think there's going to be a change in course. I hope so. But if they don't, then I feel like the prospects are bleak.
So you mentioned Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So while we're waiting for this confirmation hearing to begin for this CDC director nominee, there is intensifying scrutiny around RFK Jr. And Dr. Pate, this followed a pretty contentious hearing on Capitol Hill recently, and it focused on vaccines and autism and children's health. After hearing Secretary Kennedy's testimony, what concerns, if any, do you have about how vaccine messaging is being communicated to the public right now?
Well, I think that it's the fact that we have seen in a couple of instances a little bit of retreat from some of RFK Jr.'s assertions and the targets that he was going after. He's been embarrassed a few times and thwarted a few times. But what I think was disheartening to me about these hearings is he is not correcting his previous statements, which have been in error, and he's not demonstrating humility. And he continues to try to suggest that he is not anti vaccine, but pro science. But the problem is, if you pay attention to what he says and writes about science, he either does not understand science or he's lying about it. One of the two, because unfortunately, what he thinks is science is not science.
So, with that said, we are seeing rising measles cases, and I mean, our neighbors to the south in Utah are being hit very hard right now. So, when we see these rising measles cases alongside declining vaccination rates, in your opinion, how directly are those trends connected? And frankly, let's look at the data on that as well.
Well, I think they're very connected because, unfortunately, and certainly there is a small percentage of the population that is truly anti vaccine. Um, but that's very small. What has happened is that all of these people that have big platforms, either because of their positions in the Trump administration or because they have peddled their disinformation on social media and cable networks, they are putting out a lot that then gets amplified among people that tend to be interested in that. And what it does is it just creates a lot of uncertainty, and people are unsure. Well, wait, who do I trust? Do I trust this person or this person? And of course, you and I have talked repeatedly on your show. Trust your doctor. That's who you should trust.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is that it is human nature to say, okay, if I'm not sure, then my default will be I just won't do it. And so the problem is you think you're taking the safe route by saying, I'm not sure if the benefit's worth the benefit or the risk is greater than the benefit. And so I'm just not going to vaccinate my kid. But now, what they're not thinking, you actually have made a decision that is definitely keeping your child susceptible. And so I
Mm-hmm.
understand why they make that decision, but that is contributing to this problem. Now, I will tell you, I'm always a cup half full kind of person. I actually think what we're seeing right now is encouraging. I have we reached a point where we had presented the facts a million times, and there was little more that we could present. We've gotten you the information, we've told you what the truth is, and unfortunately, I came to the conclusion the only way we're going to get people to reject those who are out there advocating all these really terrible things from public health is we're going to have a big disease outbreak. We're just going to have to,
Mm-hmm.
and the thing about it is, as I've always said, science will eventually prove them wrong and prove those of us who have been saying what we've been saying are right. And I just didn't know if it would be in time or not. And so what I think we're seeing is people are seeing what happens when you go with that advice that supposedly is making America healthy again, yet we're having the biggest measles outbreak in decades, and we are almost certainly going to lose our measles elimination status. And we've already had a couple of children die. We're going to have many more. We're going to have people with complications. And I think that the facts are just going to become clear who was right, and they're going to lose their credibility. So I think that's a positive. The other thing is, it's a little too early to tell, but what I'm hearing from health departments in some states is that actually at this point they are starting to see a much bigger spike in vaccine uptake. That now parents seeing what is happening. I mean, it's one thing to say, I'm not going to get my kids vaccinated when there really are no measles cases out there. It's a whole nother to say when I actually know somebody else's kids have got measles, or I'm watching what's happening. And what's happening is many more people are getting vaccinated because of that, or this outbreak would be even worse than it is. So I am cautiously optimistic. We'll continue to monitor things, but I think the tide is going to turn on this.
So, Dr. Pate, a promising new study is raising hope for one of the deadliest cancers, with early results suggesting that personalized mRNA vaccines might help some patients with pancreatic cancer live longer. So, how significant are these early findings when it comes to changing the outlook for pancreatic cancer, which has historically been incredibly difficult to treat?
Yes, pancreatic cancer, unfortunately, has typically been a death sentence. Generally, the 5 year survival has been less than 13%. And
Mm.
that just for your listeners, the pancreas is an organ that is very deep in your belly. It's back against just kind of out in front of where your spine is, but all the way back there. And the pancreas is very important for making insulin, for certain other hormones that are important to digestion, your gut health, that kind of thing. But when a cancer appears, unless it appears in the one particular part of the pancreas, what we call the head, because that's where your bile duct comes in. And so it will block it, causing you to turn yellow, which actually gives us early warning that you've got the cancer. And so it might still be curable, or at least we could extend someone's life. Other than that situation, it grows and you're typically not going to know it or have non-specific symptoms. So what they did here is they took people who had, like I was just talking about, the cases where we can do the surgery. That's only
Hmm.
about 20% of cases, but they took those patients, and when they took the cancer out, what they did is they took the genetic material from those cancer cells, and then we can use the mRNA technology for vaccines to take that specific genetic material of your specific cancer and inject it back into you. And what they found is that after multiple doses of this, half of the people developed immune cells that would attack your cancer. And that is really, really significant. So we can tailor this therapy to you. And of those people that did develop those immune cells, not all of them, but the vast majority of them were still alive 6 years after that treatment. So they've already beaten the odds. And it's a very small group of people. We're talking like the total group of 16 people and about 8 that could have been candidates for this treatment. So it was a very small, but what it is kind of like a proof of concept. And so now that we see this, we can do it on a much bigger scale in studies and see, do we really see that survival advantage play out? And if we do, it's of tremendous hope for so many people. And as you and I have talked about on prior shows, pancreatic cancer is one of those cancers that we are seeing an increase in, and at earlier ages. So this could be a lot of hope. And this is another reason why we need to put pressure on our own legislature not to restrict these kind of medical technologies. Let the research occur. Let those that be available to those people that want to get it.
So, Dr. Pate, as you mentioned, I mean, this vaccine is highly personalized, and you said it's such a small sampling. So, how realistic is it then that this kind of treatment could become widely available?
Well, first of all, we have to start with the fact that the only group that this treatment in this current way that would be a candidate is that smaller group, about 1 in 5 patients with pancreatic cancer that had that early presentation where we can still go in and operate. So for most patients with pancreatic cancer, this may not have very much impact, but we can certainly hope that this leads us to other ways to be able to do that. Perhaps we can do it instead of through surgery by biopsying the tumor, taking some of the tumor that way in patients with more advanced tumors. So I do think there are some things for us to explore, but if this plays out in future studies, I mean, this is really where cancer treatment is going. It's instead of treating cancer by cell type or organ type like we have historically done, a lot of us have thought that the treatment would go towards the very specifics of your cancer, no matter where it originated and your particular genetic material. Immune therapy has made major advances. So, I'm a cup half full kind of guy, and I'm going to stay very optimistic about it. But we have to caution that we're still many years away, even if this works, from a potential large scale treatment.
I want to move on to a new study that's suggesting that extreme weather, and we're talking like heat waves to really big cold snaps, might be increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease. How strong is this evidence, Dr. Pate, that links extreme weather events to increased cardiovascular risk? And what's happening in the body during these conditions?
Yeah, I would say that evidence that there's cause and effect is very weak. But I would
Okay.
say that the evidence that there's an association is really gaining a lot of momentum and is far more strong. So I don't think that it is a single issue that we can tie it, but I do think that extremes of temperature it do certainly appear to play a role in increasing risk for heart disease. Now, we've
Hmm.
also noticed this in the past with things like air quality. So, certainly higher cardiovascular risk with poor air quality. I think that what we are finding is that heart disease is not just a matter of your genetics or not just a matter of what is your cholesterol or what's your blood pressure, but it's a whole combination of things, as well as what is your environment. Are you in a area of the country that has poor air quality? Does your work put you in situations where there's poor air quality? Are you subject to extremes of temperature with very, very hot or very cold? There's still a lot we don't understand, especially to answer your question about the why, what's exactly happening. And there's some confounding information that while some of this, it might be a more complicated because some people in one geographic area that are subjected to these temperatures don't seem to have the same effect as people in another geographic area. So we've got a lot more to learn.
All right. Well, as always, Dr. Pate, we so appreciate you. We've been talking with Dr. David Pate, former CEO of St. Luke's Health System and the co-author of the book, Preparing for the Next Global Outbreak. If you have any public health questions for Dr. Pate, just send us an email, idahomatters@boisestate.edu, and we will do our best to answer those next week. You've been listening to the Idaho Matters podcast from Boise State Public Radio. To stay in touch, you can find quick Idaho daily news every morning when you subscribe to the Connector podcast. If you're really enjoying this show, a quick rating or review on Apple or Spotify really helps other folks discover us, and we'd appreciate it. Hi, Idaho Matters podcast listeners. If you're on your smartphone right now, or if you have it nearby, I wanted to pop in to tell you about something to check out. Boise State Public Radio is now on Nextdoor. Here's what that means. Trusted local news, thoughtful reporting, and stories from across Idaho right along your neighborhood updates. If you already have the Nextdoor app, you're halfway there. Just search Boise State Public Radio and hit follow.